or she may not have known, but she made such an impact on me at the time. And Mama Ji at the time actually had said to me that, Mayrin, one day you are going to do big things. And even though at this point I can't claim to have done big things, her blessings to me at the time have always stayed with me. And so she says, Mama Ji says to us that as long as she's alive, she will always keep on coming back to join us at our book study. So although she wasn't able to make it here physically this year, she was happy to join us through technology. So let's take a look at when she joined us actually in 2019. So the music that's playing right here was, I believe, actually, was presented by, I want to say Tzu Chi's kindergarten class, or possibly younger, pre-kindergarten. And was from, I think, early March from 2019 as well, when she had last joined us. So let's welcome Sister Ji Jingyang, who is going to be hosting a conversation with Mama Ji today. Really glad to see everyone again. Today, we'd like to invite the author of this work called Seedless Watermelon, who is also the main character in the Da'ai drama that approximately translates to The Flying Clouds. She is our very young volunteer, Mama Ji. So let's welcome her. Hi, everyone. Everybody, please welcome her with a round of applause. Originally, Mama Ji was actually going to join us in person because she has so much to share with us, but her son was actually saying, why don't we join online this year, and I'll help you to do that. So similar to before, today we want to share about her life tips, the wisdom that she carries in her life to share with all of us. So why don't we first take a look? So we see this photo in her kitchen at home. Now think, we have these really, really white towels in the kitchen. Why would there be such clean towels in the kitchen? She's saying, so I've actually married into the Ji family for almost 60 years. I have so many stories to share because of the Ji family. And in our kitchen, our standard is that our towels have to be cleaned very, very, very clean and very white. And so a lot of people often see our towels and think, wow, like, how are you maintaining such clean, pretty much kitchen rags, if you will? And that was actually learned from my mother-in-law. And everything has to be put back in place. And if you see in the drawers, everything has to be very organized as well. You'll see that the towels and rags to wipe the table versus the bowls versus anything else, it's all organized. Wow, what impeccable standards to have in the home. That is also a reflection of just one's wisdom and dharma. Now, we talked about all those white and bright towels earlier. What about these blue towels? What is that for? So everyone knows that in the kitchen, things are often really oily and dirty. So if you always use white towels, it's not always very practical. So when a problem presents itself, I also will have a response and a strategy. So I decided that for certain situations where it doesn't make sense to use white towels, I got these dark blue towels. But what we keep out for people to see are always the very clean and white towels. And we kind of hide these darker towels away. So not only do we have the more presentable and white and bright towels, but we also have the more practical dark blue towels. And now we see this bench at home. There's this note that says, when you leave the seat, please put this bench back in place. What is this about? So this is actually a note left by Papa Ji. And for me, I actually want to share that I used to be a very individualistic person. Whatever I thought was right, I would advance and say that that's the only way to go. But after I joined Tzu Chi, I came to learn to be a more harmonious person. And this was a note left by my husband saying that, just reminding me that if I am moving my seat or if I'm using this bench, that I should put it back in place afterwards. Now, when I had joined Tzu Chi and spoken to Dharma Master Tseng, I was complaining to her that, oh, my husband would tell me to do this and tell me to do that. I'd complain to her, and I thought she would feel sorry for me, but she actually gave me a few pointers and enlightened me in those moments to say that, oh, so Dharma Master Tseng would remind her that ultimately we want to maintain more harmonious relationships. And it's important to not focus too much on the sense of ego and self. Now in society, we often see that men and women are more and more considered to be equals. Once upon a time, there was a time where perhaps there was more of a difference in perception of the value of men and women in society. And so a lot of the times the relationships that would be had is, who's more scared of whom, right? That was the kind of relationship in a lot of families. But what I began to learn, and what I began to learn as I joined Tzu Chi and learned from Dharma Master Tseng was that it's not about who is more scared of whom or who is more intimidated of whom, but it's who is more loving of whom. And even though it was hard for me at first to see that, or just to take a step back and to let someone else perhaps have their way when I was somebody who always had to have my way, over time, I came to be able to adjust not only my outward actions, but also the state of my mind and my heart as well. So really, I hope the same sort of experience for others to improve ourselves. Sometimes at first it may be very unnatural behaving so differently from before, but with time and with practice, we will learn to open our hearts and learn to be more loving of others. And actually, this is a Jingsi aphorism that you may have heard before, right? Again, it's not about who is more scared of whom, but it's about who loves whom more. And that was a Jingsi aphorism that I would say may have come from myself. And I really felt that before I met Tzu Chi, or actually rather, before I got married, I felt like I was a very happy person. But when I had gotten married, I really felt that I had a bad relationship with my husband, with my husband's family. And when I met Tzu Chi and shared all of my grievances with Dharma Master Zheng Yin, she taught me those words, right? It's not about who's scared of whom. It's about how we can more love and respect each other. And we talk about in Tzu Chi, gratitude, respect, and love. And so I began instilling these values in my life. And now, even with my children and their families, we see these values very much lived out through their lives as well. So as long as we are willing to change, joyfulness and happiness is right in front of us, and in fact, right in our hearts already. So in Tzu Chi, we sometimes talk about the sutra of, I'll call it moms and grandmas, or mothers and grandmothers. And so we're going to talk about a few Chinese characters today. There are one way to refer to the wife of a heterosexual married relationship is Tai Tai in Chinese. The character for Tai has a dot, I'll call it a dot, right in the middle of the character. But if you take this same dot and move it somewhere else in the character, for example, at the top right, then this turns the character into Quan, which in Chinese means dog. And dogs, we know sometimes some dogs can be more yappy and bark a lot, right? And that's not how we want to be. We want to be more gentle in our speech. And if you take the same character again and you just remove the dot, then that word in Chinese is da, which means big or large. And that's not how we want to be either. We don't want to be, oftentimes, right, we can have very big and large egos, and we don't want to do that. We don't want to inflate our egos and sense of self. And so just like that one dot in the character, we in our lives have to find the right place and the right balance to be. So let's not put that dot at the top, like the character for the dog, or remove the dot like the character for large. And in fact, jumping back to that character of large and large ego, sometimes if, for example, at home, we have too large of an ego with others, then that, if anything, just pushes people away. It makes it difficult to interact. And so what we want to be is, again, in this sort of heterosexual relationship, for the wife in this relationship, in this case, talking about herself, to find the right place and the right balance to be in this sort of relationship. Now, next, let's talk about our speech with others. Some people are very good with words or more talkative. But what's important is not only to be, for example, eloquent or a good speaker, but also to be virtuous and mindful in our speech. Once upon a time, there was somebody who, in front of Dharma Master Zheng Yin, had said that, oh, Sister Ji is such a good speaker. But Master's response was, it's not about having a lot to say, and being a good speaker, right? What's important is to be virtuous and mindful in our speech. To speak a lot, oftentimes it's really just, for example, transmitting a lot of our, I'll call it saliva particles. And that's not the kind of liquid that we want in our lives. What we want is really Dharma water. And through virtuous and mindful speech, what we can transmit is the wisdom of Dharma water, and rather not our saliva particles being spread in the air. In many ways, we can think of the current pandemic that we're in. As we all wear our masks, it's almost a reminder that let's not eat what we should not eat. Let's not say what we should not say. And many times when we're mindful of the things that we say, that actually helps us to solve a lot of problems before they even occur, and to prevent a lot of issues from arising from our own words. So I'm so thankful to Master for helping to enlighten me. Yes, so everyone listening right now, I'm sure, can see that not only is Mama Ji such a good speaker, but she speaks with so much virtue and so mindfully as well. So it's important for us to say, to speak what should be spoken, and to be mindful in our speech. So again, what does it mean to say only what you should speak, only the words that you should speak? And for Mama Ji personally, she's sharing that in her life, there were many times she felt that she had to repent for what she had done. In her marriage with her parents-in-law, her mother and father-in-law, she initially had bad relationships with them, and would have verbal conflicts with them. So she's talking about her father-in-law and how he had led a very successful career in education. And when he had come to live with the family, he had said to Mama Ji that she did not know how to properly teach children. And Mama Ji actually had immediately responded and rebutted him and said, well, you didn't raise your children well either. Like, look at my husband. I'm not happy about him either, and he's the child that you raised. So that's one example. And another example with my mother-in-law, she was such a good cook, and she had taught me how to make certain dishes, but I didn't really follow the instructions, and I would just kind of cook it the way I wanted to. And when my husband had eaten the dish that I made, he said that it was, said that it was not good at all. And I was insulted, and I immediately responded to him and said, well, what good does it do to have the dish taste really good? Look at all of you, right? Look at you and your siblings. You ate all this wonderful food, wonderfully tasting food growing up, but it doesn't look like you grew that tall either. And so obviously with these sorts of relationships, my parents-in-law did not end up living with us for very long. It was maybe a year and a half, and then had moved elsewhere. And through these experiences, and as I joined Tzu Chi, as I spoke to Dharma Master Tseng Yin, I said to her, I know that I was in the wrong. And even though I have a good heart, I know that, it was hard for me to speak, or it's hard for me to reflect the same in my speech, my actions sometimes. And that was when she said to me, even if you have a kind heart and a good heart, if the words that you speak and your temperament is not good, then you cannot consider yourself a good person either, because of the impact that your words and your attitude can have on others. So you may have heard that as a Jinxie aphorism in the past as well. And again, that is because of me, similar to the other one from before. It wasn't that I had come up with the aphorism, but it was because of my stories that Master had given me that advice, and that had become an aphorism. With the teachings of Master, I really gradually began to change. And my parents-in-law noticed this and took this to heart. And because of this, eventually they were able to move back in with us again too. So really, Mama Ji really is sharing her very personal stories to inspire us and to give us guidance as well. So we really should learn from her in speaking words that are positive to others. So now let's invite Mama Ji to share with us what kind of life she believes is the most joyful. Mama Ji shares that in Buddhism, we often talk about living, or rather being born, aging, getting sick, and dying. We'll call it 4 phases of life. Now, when I had first joined Tzu Chi, I was also thinking, I really had this approach of, I want to chase happiness and joy in life. I felt that, I didn't have a good husband. I didn't have the life I wanted. And when I asked Master for her guidance, her response to me for how to have a happy life, a joyful life, was to be joyful, or to be healthy in both mind and body. And at the time, I didn't fully understand, but I didn't dare to ask further. And it was actually recently, as I was reading more into Buddhist texts, that I understood this comment even deeper. There are many afflictions, and we'll call them poisons, that can afflict our bodies and minds. I won't go through them here at the moment. But it is these poisons that we need to be sure to avoid and keep out of our lives as much as possible, and to be disciplined in our lives, to lead a healthful life as well. For example, if we often indulge, whether in food or in various forms of entertainment or whatever it may be, it often is harmful to our health. And that is not what we want to do if we truly want to lead a healthful and joyful life. So in our impermanent and relatively short amount of times on Earth, it's so important to cherish every moment we have. And you may have heard in Tzu Chi another Jinxie aphorism or a comment that it's not about, or rather, we cannot control the length of our lives, but what we can control is the depth of them. And what that means is how we carry out our lives and to what extent we can make it meaningful. That is what truly matters. So yes, we see that Mama Ji, once upon a time, was someone who felt very negative about her life. And yet, after her time in Tzu Chi, she has become someone with big vows and aspirations to help others. So we really need to learn from her. So we as parents often know that, we want our kids to be very successful in life. What is your view on this, Mama Ji? And Mama Ji shares that, back in my day, I actually had attended a prestigious school. And, being a woman in that time, being a prestigious school, and in my particular circumstances, it wasn't an easy task. And so I always had an expectation and a expectation of my children to have good grades as well. And so I would take various measures to try to help my kids to be very good in their academics. But at some point, as one of my kids was were testing into different schools, he hadn't made it into some of their top schools. So I was very disappointed. And when I spoke to Master, what she shared with me was that towards kids, what we have is a responsibility, but not what we should not be doing is trying to control their lives. What we should do is take the wisdom of bodhisattvas to teach and to raise our children, but to use the love of a mother to care for other sentient beings. I didn't totally understand this in the beginning. But I began to change my approach and attitude towards my expectations of my children. And the approach I took was to raise my standards of myself as a parent, but to lower or to stop setting expectations and standards against my children. And my takeaway from this is that when we as parents sincerely wish well for our parents, wish well for our children, they will naturally be blessed. Yet, if we are always concerning and worrying about them, what actually happens is we bring them worry in their lives as well. And now I see that as I changed my approach as a parent, that did in fact improve the lives of my children as well. And we can see that today. So Mama Ji really has so many tips to share with us. Today we have limited time, and everybody is here to listen to you. We're running out of time today, but we hope to bring Mama Ji back again in the future. So in our final moments for the session today, we see a few pictures on screen here. There was on the wall, you saw a set of, it was like axes and shields, the weapons. And then separately, there is, I think it's either a painting or another art form of lotus. So in the past, I would actually invite Dharma Master Zeng Yan to my home in Taipei when she was visiting for other reasons. And earlier in the days, I actually had on the wall I had on the wall those weapons that you saw from earlier, and I think I didn't quite catch what she said about what happened, but I think maybe they fell down, and she said sharing that her husband had actually changed, or rather replaced it with a painting of lotuses. And the next time that Dharma Master Sungin visited, she was like, "Oh, congratulations! Your, even the swords and the spears of your home have been converted to lotuses." And in many ways, that was a representation um, of just the state of our family and our relationships as well, and the harmony that continued to grow in our family. And so you'll see in this photo, my family, my children, my grandchildren. And here she's sharing a story about how in the current home that she lives in, she was once told that, oh, this house has bad luck, right? You want to live somewhere else. But what she's reminding everyone is that we have to be very cautious not to be superstitious. What matters is what is in our hearts and our minds. It's not what is external to us. And if we carry kindness in our hearts and bring kindness to others through our actions, we create blessings for ourselves and bring joy and peace into our own lives. So thank you to Mama Ji today for her sharing.
All right, so we're very grateful for Mama Ji for sharing today. And even though she can't be with us in person, and she's still able to connect with us with the use of technology, and she have maybe shared some of the stories that we have heard before. But every time she shares a different story, we can learn something new from it, despite it being in the same stories. So we have a lot of feedback from people that are listening in. We have a feedback from Penang, and who's very grateful for Mami Ji for sharing her example, how she transformed herself as well as transform her family through her actions. So here, I just realized that even though we not only have international guided reading, we even have a remote host. So this gave me new ideas for the future. So Sister Huarong would like to add another story.